Hey there. I offer this podcast freely. Your support really makes a difference. To make a donation, visit reneemckenna.com. Welcome to Spiritual Psychology. My name's Renee LaValle McKenna, and I bring my 30-plus years as a recovering addict and ex-crazy person turned therapist and shamanic healer to bring you snackable teachings on spirituality, psychology, and all things personal growth. And today I want to talk about how we heal. And I've always found it fascinating, the correlation between the physical world and the metaphysical world. And how nature and science, through the study of our own bodies and what we know about biology, physics, chemistry, and even astrophysics, has a tremendous amount to teach us about growth, evolution, and healing in the non-physical realms of mind, emotions, and spirit. And I have to say, I find it kind of unbelievable that anyone who's deeply immersed in science could be an atheist, because anytime I explore or learn about the human body, about the environment, about the celestial realms of astronomy, I'm just overwhelmed by the affirmation of an unfathomably intelligent design that is always working for the greater good. And I was recently doing some learning about physical healing processes, and I'm just overwhelmed by the complexity of the human body and how all these different cells and systems communicate with each other to come and go, to dilate or constrict, to clear away debris and build new structures. And the whole thing is focused on healing and balance and health, optimization. And as many of you know, I'm living in Manhattan right now, right in the heart of the Upper West Side. Never been much of a people watcher until I moved here, and I can spend so much time just sitting in my window watching the world go by because there's so much happening here. The sidewalks are just flowing with people, the street filled with cars and trucks and bikes and messengers and mopeds. Pigeons flying around overhead and all kinds of little songbirds. It's springtime. There's all these storefronts, apartment buildings, gyms, restaurants, hardware stores. Trash pickup is almost every night. My awareness of the incredible complexity and flow of the life force and how it all works together is just palpable here. And of course, it's intermixed with churches, synagogues, art studios, writers' workshops, bars and gambling dens. And it has become clear over time that life is like a fractal. And fractals are patterns generally seen in math and geometry, that when you magnify them, it reveals that the structure repeats itself infinitely over and over the deeper you look. It correlates with the idea that each of our cells holds the DNA for our entire structure. And for me, the metaphor, the magnificent city of New York, is a metaphor for the complexity of our own bodies. And that each body, mind, emotion configuration, which is what we really are, is its own very intricate and complex metropolitan structure. And so if everything's functioning well, the trash men are coming and picking up the recycling, the water in the sewer, the subway are flowing under the street, the electricity's working, I don't even have to pay attention to any of that stuff. I can just go out, get myself a bagel and a latte. I'm actually more of a chai, yogurt, granola person, but for most of us in the Western world, whatever we want is available to us without too much difficulty. And so when our bodies are healthy, everything's flowing along fine. We don't have to have any awareness or consciousness about all these systems that keep everything going. But when there's a problem, when there's an injury, a trauma, or a chronic issue like anxiety, depression, addiction, maybe we're suffering in our relationship, unhappy in our job, or we become sick or injured, then a different process needs to happen to bring us back to health and healing. Actually, a whole bunch of complicated things need to happen. And I happen to live both on an ambulance path and near a local police station. So there's a lot of sirens here day and night working to keep everything in order. And the same thing happens in our bodies, in our psyches, and in our spirit as well. Healing is always available to us and actually part of the natural function of our system, both externally and internally. And I have dedicated my life to helping people heal emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and relationally. And as long as we're living, that's an ongoing, continually evolving process. And I remain deeply involved in my own healing continuation. And because life is a verb, it's a process. Healing growth, expansion, and evolution is endlessly unfolding. There's only one place we get to when we're all done here, and that is death. Most of us aren't in a rush to get there. And although certainly we can get to places of stasis and balance where everything is functioning well, purely because of the natural aging process and the complexity of our interrelationship with lots of other things that are in change, there was always work to do. And I'm particularly interested in systemic function and dysfunction, because one of the things that's really important in evolution is the improvement of the larger systems. It's believed that the beginning of life started as cells in the primordial ooze, and the cells organized themselves into compound structures and eventually became organisms ever growing in complexity. Eventually we got fish and other aquatic creatures because the earth was mostly covered with water, I believe. And somewhere along the lines, those aquatic creatures crawled out of the water, learned how to breathe air, which means they developed whole new organs called lungs, and then some of them sprouted wings. Now, how all that happens is a great mystery, but that process hasn't stopped, and I'm enthralled by that mystery. And although the common cultural perspective these days seems to be one of fear and doom and gloom, I'm incredibly hopeful. We can't kill the life force. It's infinitely creative and regenerative. And like all of the other organic forms that have gone before us, humanity is always evolving and transforming and will eventually become something else or die off. And that's not a tragedy in the life cycle that we're all a part of. World without end. Amen. And the more we can come into trust that the life force knows what it's doing, you may choose to call that God or goddess or universal mind or just the evolutionary impulse and healing properties found in science and biology, the more we can align ourselves with those processes rather than struggling against them, the better everything seems to go. But none of us do that perfectly because we're all unique and perfectly imperfect, having our own particular perspective and experience. And becoming conscious of where we struggle, where we suffer, where that flow is being blocked, which is really a lot of the basis of Chinese medicine, which I'm super interested in right now. I actually just started working with a Qigong healer doing remote sessions on my knees, which is why I got interested in the deeper healing processes and how there may be systemic, or absolutely there is, some systemic dysfunction within myself that's created this chronic problem in my legs. And most of us have some chronic problems. Matter of fact, I've never met anyone who doesn't have them, whether they're consciously aware of them or not. And from a spiritual perspective, those chronic issues, the places where we feel stuck, suffering, unfulfilled, where there's a blockage in our chi, or maybe it's pronounced ki, I'm not sure. That's what the life force would be called in Chinese medicine, which I think correlates to prana in the more yogic traditions. But most of the great teachers point to the idea that we incarnate in this form with particular work to do, with particular things to evolve or experiences to have. And again, the more conscious we are, the more we can align ourselves to this larger system, to find our place in the big city where we're engaged in ways that feel good to us, then we can enjoy that healthy flow. And when we're healthy and happy, we can share that health and happiness with others, whether we do that intentionally or just by our vibe as we move through the world. So I'm fascinated by this correlation with the physical world and the non-physical world, particularly our biology and our mind, emotions, and spirit, and how they can instruct each other. Because we are a system that all those things work together. It's one of the downsides of scientific materialism that breaks everything into separate parts. It allows us to get a lot of information about them, but we forget that we can learn all we want about the heart or the liver, but if you take it out and put it on the table, it's a dead thing now. It's just a lump of meat. It only exists within the body, which can't live without the mind. which can't function well without our emotions and our spirit, and is completely immersed in the larger structure, being supported by all the city services of running water, food, electricity, friends, a place to live. That the deeper truth, as Buddhism teaches, is interbeing, that we really aren't a separate self. And all the teachings in non-duality point to that great truth as well. And particularly from an emotional and spiritual and mental standpoint, most of the suffering we have is rooted in our misunderstanding, our belief that we are separate and uncared for, that the metaphysical ambulances and police of the larger system will not come to help us. Now, again, this is incredibly complex, but I was looking into how we heal on a physical level. And I'm particularly fascinated with this interplay of energy, emotions, and physical dis-ease, the mind-body-spirit connection, and these systemic structures that are dysfunctional and how they can be reorganized or improved. And that's really my work in spiritual psychology. When I'm working with clients, we're looking for the deeper, outdated internal operating systems that need to be updated. So my interest in this is very personal right now because I've had chronic issues with my legs, really since I was a little kid. I spent a tremendous amount of time on crutches, and it's very interesting from a psycho-spiritual standpoint to look at where we have strength and weakness in our body and the different energy centers or chakras. And almost all my physical issues throughout my life have happened from the base of my spine, the Muladhara, the first chakra down. And my own core issue stems from never bonding with, feeling loved, or supported by my parents or my family. And understanding what our core wounding is can be really helpful in understanding where we're being called to grow, heal, and shift in our systemic belief structures, our karmic issues, maybe what we came here in this lifetime to work on. So some people, when they get sick, will always lose their voice, or they have a lot of pain in their neck. That's a fifth chakra issue. Some people have heart disease or heartache, or they might get breast cancer. That's a fourth chakra issue. Others might have stomach or digestive issues, liver and kidneys, difficulty processing their experience, issues with money and power. That's third chakra issues. Many women have issues in their reproductive organs, terribly painful periods, fibroids, cysts, endometriosis, an inability to get pregnant, blockages in intimacy, creativity. Those are second chakra issues. Others might have mental illness, ADD, cognitive dysfunction. Those are sixth chakra issues. And a generalized hopelessness, lack of inspiration or connection with the divine or the larger system. Those could be seventh chakra issues. So I'm preparing for 2 different surgeries on each of my legs this year, a full knee replacement in my left knee and an ACL repair in my right knee. And because we're all connected, what's happening in my body and my physical circumstances is not separate from what's happening in my mind, emotions, and spirit. And with chronic issues, and those are things that continue to persist or reproduce themselves over time, then there's a systemic dysfunction in me. And although it can be challenging, these deeper issues that may be built into the system that are causing problems or blocking things from flowing as they should, when we can discover and correct or construct new, more functional systems, then whole new things can grow and present themselves that we might not have imagined. I have a dear friend who was just visiting me for a week in New York. And she grew up about 10 blocks from where I live right now. And she's blown away by how clean and beautiful and functional New York has become. By the bike lanes and the beautiful parks, how clean the streets are, how safe things feel in what used to be really sketchy neighborhoods. And I don't know enough about New York history or politics to speak to the specifics of that, but there's been some systemic change that has elevated the quality of the life experience here in New York. And so looking to align myself with my own physical healing process, I'm acutely aware that the body, the physical realm, is often a manifestation of our underlying beliefs and unresolved emotional issues. And so in the physical body, there's 4 stages of healing if we have an injury. So there's hemostasis, inflammation, proliferation, and remodeling. And if things go wrong at any one of those stages, then the healing won't happen completely. And this is fascinating for me as a trauma therapist. And I'm really doing an archaeological dig within myself to see where I've become stuck along this process so I can move forward with my own healing with this chronic issue. I'm actually pretty excited about it now that I'm looking at it from this perspective. So after we have an injury, the first stage, hemostasis, stops the blood flow. Say we have a cut, but this can also be used for an emotional or psychological trauma as well. So the hemostasis is to stop the problem, stop the bleeding. In your body, there's all these different cells that come together to create a blood clot. If the blood clot doesn't happen, you might bleed out and die if the cut is bad enough. And so from an emotional, psychological, or spiritual standpoint, generally the first thing we do is remove ourselves in one way or another or try to stop what's happening, stop the pain. And this might mean addiction, other compulsive or obsessive behaviors. We might become hypervigilant or isolate or shut ourselves down. There's many ways that people might try to stop the suffering that is happening. And the next stage is inflammation. And in your body that is preventing the spread of the damage. All these cells come in to clear away dead or damaged cells. Our internal immune system goes on high alert. And this might be where people develop chronic anxiety, phobias, some of the PTSD responses that people have, again, moving deeper into self-medicating. In a healthy healing function, inflammation is necessary to kind of clear the area up. But if you get stuck in any one of these stages, things can't move on. And the biologists don't totally understand how our body moves from inflammation into the next stage, which is proliferation. And proliferation is really the creation of like a scaffolding or a foundation for new tissue to be formed. And from a psychosocial standpoint, I think a lot of us get stuck in hemostasis or inflammation and don't move into proliferation of this creation of new and healthy structures to replace the old and damaged ones, or the new structures that are created are inadequate. And the final stage is remodeling. And remodeling can take a long time. I broke my wrist last year, and it's probably about 90% now, but I still can't do a handstand without some pain. And even the muscles on that side when I'm lifting weights is still a little bit weaker than my left side. But it's coming along. It just takes time for the bone to completely fill in and solidify with the new bone cells to be as strong as it was before. And with my knee replacement, I'm going to get a completely new structure. Hopefully much more functional than the one that I've been limping around on. And that's what good therapy, personal growth work, and spiritual practice can be about, is this proliferation and remodeling stage to move us out of just being stuck in constriction or reactivity and move us into building new, healthy, more functional structures, maybe even structures that didn't exist before. And I know that that has been the process for me and my clients psycho-spiritually. Again, we're part of this larger evolutionary process in an endlessly creative life force, always seeking new, more interesting, more functional or healthy ways of doing things, both individually and collectively. And the more we can open and align ourselves to participate in this healing, evolving process, then the more healthy and functional we become on all levels. Physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, socially, creatively, relationally. And that is my wish for you, to move easily and naturally through this always present process of healing that's available to us on all levels, and to open and allow new structures, new ways of being, relating, of living that are more fulfilling and joyful, both for ourselves and for everyone we're engaged with. Thank you so much for listening. Deep gratitude to my supporters on Patreon and through this podcast. Blessings on your path until we meet again. This is Renee LaValle McKenna for Spiritual Psychology.